in the conference room. We think that the pandemic, we haven't really have chance to see each other again. I know some of you still join this from virtually, but still it's good to get back to the hotel and can see people here. And also this is our first hybrid meeting, not just breakfast, it's for the entire Dollar Chapter program. So hopefully this will work, and we definitely want to get feedback from everybody here, even people on virtual. So we will see if there's anything we can improve or change. So please give that feedback. At the end of the meeting, we will send out the monthly survey. So that's where you can give additional input on this hybrid meeting today. So our speaker, I will do a quick introduction, then I will make some announcement at the end of the meeting, which is about, usually we end about 10:30, but it may over a few months over the 10:30, but we will definitely make some announcement at the end. So our speaker today, Direct Embera, is a PhD. He's an author, speaker, consultant, and entrepreneur. His book, Good Decisions, Better Outcomes, is guide to help individuals and the business owners to make a better decisions. Dr. Embera collaborates with companies in organization change management for effective, transforming, and lasting results. He focuses on reducing risk and cost for business owner and the company using a decision-making framework that is repeatable, reliable, and consistent. In addition, Dr. Embera has over 30 years of management and leadership experience. He held multiple positions from director to executive VP and the CEO. He was also co-founder of 3 software companies, of which he and his co-founders sold one, and he's currently working on another. Lastly, Dr. Embera received his PhD in applied science from SMU. He has taught graduate courses in logistics systems engineering at SMU, and also supply chain management and in business at the University of Dallas Graduate School of Management. So without further delay, let's welcome our speaker today, Dr. Embera. Thank you so much.
If Gerard is speaking, we can't hear him.
Welcome, everybody. I'm going to start one more time. So if you missed it, I said thank you for being here on a Saturday morning. I know you guys have other things to do, and I just offered someone $5, so only one person raised their hand. Did you raise your hand? It was after she raised her hand? Okay, no, yeah, okay, she's saying yes. I didn't see that. So, but anyway, so when I said the $5, Jack Canfield has a workshop he does, and he does $100. And I can't afford $100, but his was all about motivational speaking and be better yourself. But what we're going to talk about today is business transformation, preparing your employees return to the office. And as much as this is for the employees, this is more about you and things that you can do when the employees are returning back to the office. So let's take a look here and find out what's taking place here. So what are you going to expect here? So you're going to expect some things there, the water cooler talk, people coming back and not being very effective, not being very efficient. And what they'll do is end up spending time and talking. There's also going to be information sharing, not relevant to work. So that's a euphemism for gossip. People gossiping when they get back there. And then you can also notice emotions are going to probably taking over some of the control of the people at work. only because we've been out for a while and then we're coming back and we're trying to get used to relating with other individuals, all the nuances that an individual may have. Whereas when you're at home, it's, you roll out of bed, you have your coffee, you don't even have to get dressed, and it's a great time. So these are things that you're going to have to expect. But what I want to bring to your attention is that 52% of the employees who are tenure at work within 3 months or less are starting to look for other places to work. So that's a big challenge for the employers, because as you hire someone, statistically speaking, within 3 months, after the third month, they're going to start looking for another place to work at. And that goes up to 60% when it's between 3 and 6 months. So the challenge that you have as an employer is, what can you do as a leader, as an employer, to keep those individuals there? Because it costs a lot of money to hire a new employee. It really does. And sometimes you may not get the most wonderful employee, and sure enough, they're the ones that stay there. So it's one of those things that happen. So let's talk about the takeaways today. And there's 3 major takeaways here that we're going to talk about. One is decisions. How do we make decisions, and how can you use those decisions to make this a better workplace for you and for the employees? We're also going to talk about emotions. Believe it or not, emotions are going to play a big part at work. Emotions are just something that are part of life. And the last takeaway that I want you to leave with is data. Why is data important to have a wonderful workplace? And I'll talk about that, because you'll be surprised how important data is for your workplace. So I'm going to go over the outline, and one of the things first I'd like to say, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I do have a slide at the very end for questions that you want to ask. There's 2 kinds of questions. There's good questions and there's excellent questions. I'll answer the good ones, and on the excellent ones, I'll have to get back to you. So just keep that in mind there. All right, so the 4 things we're going to talk about today is the business transformation, then the emotions in the workplace, and the last one is the influences of data, and we'll finish it up with a summary. So let's start off with the decision-making process. So how do we make decisions? Why do we make bad decisions? And how can we make better decisions? So this is what I want you to keep in mind as I go through these slides here. So I'm going to ask you, how do we make decisions? How do we make decisions at work? Do we base it on emotions? Do we have a process? Do we get other people involved? Do we get the right other people involved? What do you guys do at work? So you get others involved. Good.
It's not like a democracy that you get their input and then just like weigh pros and cons, both sides,
and then make a decision. Good. Anybody else? You guys just make decisions, right? Said we're going to do it there. Not making a decision is also a decision. So in the research that I did for my book, I learned that not making a decision is a decision, and people don't make decisions because they are afraid of the repercussions. They rather let someone else make the decision and then play off of that. If it's a good decision, then yes, I was all in. If it's a bad decision, I told you, but they don't make a decision themselves. So how many decisions do you think we make in a day? Thousands. Okay, I hear thousands. Like 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. Anybody want to guess? I heard thousands over here. Let's look at this side of the room here. We have the I am not going to make a decision group here, and that's okay. That's all right. So we make about 35,000 decisions a day. 35,000 decisions, and that's according to a professor out of, I forgot what university, but he talks about the number of decisions that we make. And if you think about it, are you going to have that next nut there? Are you going to ask me a question? These are the things that you make in terms of decisions. So let's look at ways that we make decisions and systems one thinking. So Dr. Daniel Kahneman is a well-renowned individual. He's a Nobel Prize winner, recipient, and he wrote a book called Systems Thinking. He got his Nobel Prize in economics, though his background is psychology. The Nobel Prize doesn't have a award for psychology, but because his work has been used so much in I guess in finance and the economics, that they gave him a Nobel Prize for that. Him and Atmos did the prospect theory, which pretty much says that you are more upset if you lose than you win. And that's just the way things are. So he wrote a book called Systems Thinking, which I highly recommend. For me, it was a hard read. It's about 500 pages, 450 to 500, but you learn so much about the psyche of the individual. And Systems One thinking is what we do most of the time. And what is Systems One thinking? Well, Systems One thinking is fast. It's really fast. You don't have to think about it much. It's efficient because it's fast. It's efficient, right? It's to the point where you can make decisions without really having to think too much about it. It's effortless, and it doesn't require too much brain power. So that's Systems One thinking. It's important for you to know that, because in your decision-making process at work, I'm going to tell you, or not tell you, but I am going to suggest that there's better ways to think than to use Systems One. So a good example of Systems One thinking is what? What is 1 + 1? Now, if you answer 3 or 4, I cannot help you. Just can't do it. But if you answer 2, that's great. Well, if we have Systems One thinking, guess what? We have Systems Two thinking. And I hope by the turtle, you'll understand what I'm talking about in Systems Two thinking. So Systems Two thinking is slow. It's very methodical. It's critical thinking, and it's logical. It requires a lot of brain power. So Systems Two thinking is something we don't do. We don't like to do as humans. I don't like to do it. I wrote a book on it, and I hated writing the book because it just required too much of my thoughts. But Systems Two thinking is that part where you use it when you're going to have to make some critical decisions, some life-changing, business-changing decisions. Do I move my organization? Do I hire this C-level individual? Do we start a new service? Do I let this employee go? These are more of the critical decisions, and that's where System Two thinking comes into play. So a good example here would be, prove to me that 1 + 1 is equal to 2. That's a little bit harder than saying 1 + 1 is 2. Prove to me that that's what 1 + 1 is equal to 2. So that's Systems Two thinking. It's critical thinking. It's methodical. Now, I am going to mention that throughout the presentation, because this is one of the keys to this whole process of trying to keep your employees and trying to be a better leader, better workplace. And then there's the last one, which is emotions. Emotions are just part of life. Emotions come into decisions that we make. The only time emotions don't come into play is if you're autistic, according to Daniel Kahneman, which I tend to agree, because if you're autistic, your emotions just don't have a relevance in the decision-making process. But some of the greatest salespeople understand that emotions play a big part in your decision-making process. And you have Gittenmore out of Dallas wrote that book on the Little Red Book on Sales, the Bible Red Book on Sales. Talks about emotions there. Sandler, he wrote that book on You Can't Teach a Kid to Ride a Bicycle at a Workshop. And his whole process is about narrowing a person down and let them make the decision. But he also talks about emotions being a part of your decision-making process. And so some of the great people in decision-making theory, Kenny, Hammond, Daniel Kahneman, Raphael, all these people talk about Clemens. They all talk about emotions playing a part in your decision-making process. So what I'm letting you know is, as you're at work, you've got to take heed to the decisions or to the emotions that you have and how they're displayed. And one of the biggest things, and I have something that I call the trifecta influencers, how it influences our decision-making process. It's, you have needs, you have wants, and you have emotions, and all three work together in your decision-making process. But that's for another time. Okay, so Systems One thinking, Systems Two thinking, and emotions all work together in your decision-making process. So why do we make bad decisions? Okay, she read my slides already. No, that's good. No, we let our emotions do it. Absolutely. You think this kid's making a good decision here? That's me, of course. Not making too wise of a decision. So yes, emotions get the best of us. We allow our emotions to take over in our decision-making process, and we don't think clearly. We say something out of anger, out of spite, whatever the case may be. We let our emotions take over. And we cannot let our emotions take over. We have to maybe something like a stoic person. Marcus Aurelius, he was a stoic philosopher. He became one. And towards the end, he studied for like 30 plus years since he was a kid. But he got to a point where he was so good, he became one of the greatest Roman generals ever because of his staying focused on the situation and not letting emotions come into play. And because of that, he was able to win an epic battle where all his soldiers who thought he wasn't good enough to be in that position, the way he got into it is a different story. But he was frail looking, he was small, and they thought of him weak. But when he got into a battle where the Romans couldn't win, and he developed a plan that allowed him to win, and it was because he let his emotions get an effect. And then that's when the soldiers said, this is the guy that we want. So emotions play a very big part in your decision-making process, and how you address them is going to be even bigger with your employees. Then there's the recognize the implications of the decision. We make bad decisions because we don't recognize what's going to take place next week or the week after. We just don't recognize how much of an effect it has on decisions that we make. And that could be just about anything. You decide to buy the Lamborghini over the fuel-efficient vehicle. You might like it for the first month, and then when you have to fill up and you have to get maintenance done, you're saying, what was I thinking? Because I didn't recognize, well, my emotions got involved, but I also didn't recognize the implications of my decision. And then there's also the fully understand the situation. You can make some very bad decisions if you don't understand the situation. If you are trying to make a decision where there's a great deal of data and things that you're not aware of, things that are not in your expertise, then chances are you're going to make a bad decision. And that's something that you don't want to do, especially when you're talking with employees. You've got to understand the HR rules. You got to understand, and if it's depending on the state, how you can let an employee leave or go, how you can fire one. You can't just be emotionally involved and say you're fired, because there's a lot of implications to that. And you think that I'm going to be the big old bad boss here, and I'm going to show people. And then here comes the CEO, which I'm talking about what happened with me. I was CEO of a company, and someone let someone go, and I said, if you can't do that, oh yeah, we can. So there was a lot of repercussions after that, unfortunately, because I knew the employees, and I knew that this employee was going to do things that it's going to bog us down. So if you don't understand the situation, you shouldn't be making decisions. Or if you know someone who understands it, get with them instead. Like you said, get people involved. And the last one is stay focused. You make bad decisions because you're not staying focused on what's in front of you. You're not staying focused on the prize here. Instead of being in systems 2 thinking, remember systems 2, critical thinking, you're in systems 1 thinking. So you're working, you're doing things at work, you're having to build a plan for the employees, you're having to do something that relates to the employees, and everything you do, by the way, relates to the employees. You're going to start a new service, delete a service, hire a new individual, let one go. Depending on the size of the people that you have, it's going to affect everybody. So you're having to make decisions, those critical decisions, you got to stay focused. You can't make a decision listening to talk radio on your computer, writing up a letter on termination, because it just doesn't work. Your brain, no matter what anybody says to you, you cannot multitask. Cannot do it. Cannot do it. Oh, I can multitask. No, you can't. Well, I can show you, look, I can write with my hands, and here's A and B. It's okay. But you can't think. You can't solve a problem here and write a paper here at the same time. Even computers can't do that. So you got to stay focused. All right. So we talked about how we make decisions. How do we make bad decisions? So how can we make better decisions? Does anybody want to take a guess on that? Don't let your emotions get in the way. Very good. Someone's paying attention. No, everyone's paying attention. So let's look into some of the ways we can make better decisions. Framing questions and requests. What do I mean by framing questions? Please.
Framing the question, are we talking about understanding the problem?
That could be one way, and as a matter of fact, I talk about that in the workshop, but framing the question is one of the 8 business traps in business. Framing the question is the way you ask the question that could lead an individual to think one way versus another. Let me give you an example here. Is it okay if I smoke while I pray? That's a tough question, yes. So I got this because I saw a movie a few years ago, and I said, man, I love that. It was the 2 popes talking, and it says, but if you ask, like, is it okay if I pray when I smoke? Oh, absolutely. It's the same thing there.
Another question back.
Yes.
Where? Where are you playing?
Okay, we didn't get that far into the movie. You know, they didn't talk about where, just outside, but let's say it was outside. So just think about the question. If I come up and say, you're a pope or a priest, is it okay if I smoke while I pray? No, it's not. But if I ask, hey, I'm going to take a smoke break. Can I pray while I'm smoking? Oh, absolutely. You see how you're framing the question there? That's what I mean by framing. So at work, it would be something like, why do you always do this the wrong way? Okay, that's a bad way of framing the question. You might want to frame it as, hey, the requirements suggest that we do it this way. Can we talk about the other processes that you did here? See, so I'm just framing the question differently. How you frame the question as a request is going to put someone at ease or in a defensive position. So as an employer, a leader, a manager, you've got to be cautious, or you got to be cognizant of how you frame the questions. That's why I say critical thinking, systems 2 thinking. Okay, so, and by the way, the more you practice this, the better it becomes. When you first start doing this, you're gonna have to be in systems 2 thinking. But like anything else, the more practice, the more you do it, that systems 2 thinking, which is this much energy, gets down to here where it's second nature. Right now, second nature for us, or for me when I was getting into management, was, why did you do this way? You know you're not supposed to do it that way. And now after years of practice, it's, hey, these are the requirements, but let's talk about the processes that you used here. So you see, it's requirements and processes. It's nothing about what you did. The other way of making good decisions is getting the big picture. So what I mean by getting the big picture is thinking systems. So my background's in systems engineering, in logistics and operations research. And what it is that systems thinking is think about the whole picture and how one thing might affect another thing, might affect another thing. So if you're making those critical, tough decisions, what you want to do to make better decisions is think about the totality. Think about how, remember earlier I said you don't understand the implications. Think about the implications when you make the decision. And of course, critical thinking, that goes without saying, systems 2 thinking. If anything that you take away from this presentation when it comes to being a better employee, a better leader, a better manager, is to think critically. And once you start thinking critically, things are going to become much easier for you at work. Okay, so we talked about our decision-making process. Now let's go into emotions at the workplace. And this gets really good. I'm going to talk about how negative emotions impede our performance, how they affect our types of emotions, and ways to abate those emotions for better performance. So how negative emotions impede our performance? Now, there's many ways that they do this, and we could start off with actions that hinder us. So our emotions could hinder our decision-making process, our actions, because we're too upset, we can't concentrate, we can't work, so we're hindered, we're tied in, chained to what our emotions are driving us to be. We can't think critically. Leads us to frustration, okay? If we are emotionally bound by what's going on inside, then it could lead to frustration on the outside. It could be that an employee is very frustrated or emotionally charged because you're not allowing him or her to do what they need to do to make their department, their areas much better. So it leads to frustration because of the negative emotions you as a leader may have towards that individual or just towards that department. And it happens. I mean, unless you're autistic, then emotions are in the workforce. Dampens brainstorming. Imagine being in a room and someone is there, not the Debbie Doer, but who's that? What's that acronym? The person, what's it? Debbie Downer. There you go. Yes, I'm Debbie Downer. I'm in here and I'm going to bring everybody down. And it's because I'm emotionally charged with something that took place earlier. So I'm going to let my frustrations out. And then that dampens everything else within the meeting. So, that's just one example. It could be also that the person's just upset for whatever reason, and you could tell it in the meeting. It's the way they interact with others. So you may not want to interact because, okay, if I say something that individual doesn't like or finds offensive, then we're going to get into this argument. So, and whether you think this or not, saying it doesn't affect me, like I said, unless you've practiced it, like Marcus did for 35 years, they're going to affect you. You have to really work on not allowing individuals impact you. Pollutes good news. Here's all the good news, but someone's very upset and they bring everything else down. And then, of course, that affects performance because you're too much involved with your emotions. Now, I put an asterisk there because there is some research that shows that if you're upset, that you could turn that anger into something positive and be much more effective. But that does happen, but for the most part, it affects your performance in a negative way. So the type of emotions that affect our performance, of course, we've talked about some. The first one that comes to my mind is anger, wrath. It leads to irrational behavior. Then we have frustration, and we talked about that earlier. Often leads to anger. I'm frustrated, I can't do this, so they don't let me do this, so you get angry. Then there's stress. Believe it or not, emotions get you stressed and you end up getting sick. It lowers your performance. And then, of course, there's the apprehension. You're anxious. Well, what do you mean by that? Well, how does that affect me? Well, believe it or not, it costs companies roughly $440 billion a year in performance if in also an external absenteeism. So you got two things going there. If you're anxious, apprehension, you're missing work or you're not performing, and the cost to that to your organization is $40 billion a year. There's also a few more here that affect you. Animosity. Well, yeah, if you're upset, can turn the workplace into a chaotic and toxic environment. And as a manager and leader, you got to recognize these things and change that. You've got to turn that around. You've got to put your foot down using critical thinking and framing questions to turn that situation around, because it could become very toxic. And I've been in these situations where things got really toxic at a department and we had to revamp the whole process there, meaning that we had to get rid of a lot of people, unfortunately. Also annoyed. So interruptions can cause employees to become annoyed. Be cognizant of when you're working, when you're having individuals who are working on a project or analysis, not that is it done yet? You come back 10 minutes. Where do you stand now? Okay, you come back an hour. We having a meeting. You come back and maybe 15 minutes. Okay, we got to do this. That's very annoying. That's just very annoying, and you've got to recognize those things. So, okay. Yes, you have a question, please. Mm-hmm. So the question is, if I'm in a situation like that, what would I do instead? Well, the first thing is, and again, this depends on the situation there, is to think critically, but don't let your emotions get the best of you. That's the very first thing you got to do. So if you're involved in a situation where there's some of this going on, some back and forth, you got to go in there with something that's okay. Let me just listen to both sides, or let me understand the situation, and don't let your emotions get involved. That's very hard to do unless you practice it. So understand the situation, think critically, and don't let your emotions get involved. The last one, again, is very difficult, until you continue to practice it. But that would be my biggest suggestion to you. You know, when I was at UPS, one of the, and you could take this as a tidbit, you have these employees and you're arguing with another manager or a coworker. They come in here and they're yelling everything like this. The best thing you can do to de-escalate that and really turn the whole thing around is first listen to them, don't say a thing, don't get all upset. And before they're even finished, just say, hey, would you like a Coke? What you've done there is you've taken that kind of that anger and say, okay, well, what? I want a Coke. So you take them from here to here. So again, it goes back to critical thinking. Don't let your emotions get involved and try to change that whole process around from the framing part. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
So types of emotions that affect performance. This is some statistics. Frustration, 56.2%. Stress, 45.1%. And being anxious. So these are the top 3 things of emotions that affect performance at a workplace. So you got to recognize frustrations in your workforce and people being stressed and being anxious. You got to look after these things because these are the emotions that are most prevalent in a workplace. Okay, so ways to abate harmful emotions for better performance. Well, how do you do that? Believe it or not, provide emotional intelligence training. Statistics show that by having this type of training, you could help the workforce be more receptive to each other. You'll have more productivity. And, you know, I know that being an engineer, when you talk about having a emotional intelligence training, I'm like, oh, this is all foo-foo stuff. Well, I used to think that until I did research for my book on how people think, and my gosh, emotions just play such a big thing. So now when someone says emotional training, I don't put it off as foo-foo anymore. I say, okay, I understand what you mean by that, and I understand the impacts it has on an organization. Manage your own emotions. Of course, you saw that coming from the very beginning. At least I hope I conveyed that. You got to manage your emotions. You cannot let some employee who you've told 1,000 times, don't do this, and they do it again. Can't let your emotions get involved and just maintain your equanimity and say, you know, here's what you've done, here's the process. Should this continue again, you're making a decision that you don't want to be here anymore. Remember, talk to them. You're making the decision, not me. These are the requirements. You're making the decision to leave the organization. So you got to manage your emotions. You got to recognize them, understand them, and manage the situation. Those 3 things. It's again, it's sometimes hard if you haven't practiced this. Okay, so emotions of the workforce, we talked about how they affect us, how they impede us, how much they cost us, and things that we could do, which is the biggest thing, is to think critically and recognize our emotions. Now I'm going to talk about the influence of data. How does the data influence our workforce? Anybody want to take a gander at that? Anyone want to take a shot at how does data make our employees work effectively? How does data make us a better workplace? Anybody want to?
It's another point of information for you.
Yeah.
To base your decision on.
Yes, you're right on track there, right on point. So I'll give you some examples here. We'll talk about why consider data in your workforce, how to consider data, and the impact of using data. And it's all very important. Sometimes I think, well, why do I need data at the workforce? Well, you're going to learn here why we need the data here. Why consider data? Why ask that question? Well, first of all, it improves accountability. It makes it easier for you to hold individuals accountable. Here's the data, here's what we're supposed to be doing, and this is how things need to get done. So now you have a metric for yourself that everybody has the same metric, or everybody has a metric, should not play any favoritism. It also gives you better planning. How many times have you been at work and you've led a team, and because either financial reasons, the organization can afford more people, or you don't recognize that you need more people. Data is good for planning, because the one thing you don't want to do is have a group of employees where the work exceeds the amount of the capabilities of the employees. And the only way you can do that is to have data and use it. So it gives you a tool for better planning. But it also enhances the work environment. How does it enhance the work environment? How does data enhance the work environment? So you think about it, I'm an employee and I am held responsible for 10 widgets an hour. But this other employee does 6 widgets an hour, works right next to me. And the manager comes around, oh, you're doing a good job, Gerard. Oh, you're doing a good job. How do I feel who I'm doing 10 widgets an hour, being told by the manager that I'm doing a good job, and the employee right next to me who's doing 6 widgets an hour is told to be doing a good job? I'm like, there's a 60-40 there. Someone's a little bit more effective. Someone's 40% more effective. So then why would I want to be 100% or 10 widgets per hour when I go down to 6? So that's one way of enhancing the work environment. The other one is we're both doing 10 widgets an hour, so that's 20, but we have 25 items coming down that we need to put together. My manager comes by and says, okay, you guys need to work harder, you need to work faster, you got to get this done. But yet they don't understand that it's physically impossible to do 25 widgets between 2 people in an hour. The most we can do is 20 an hour. So these are how it enhances the work environment. And it's important, again, that you understand these when you go back to work. If you don't have any measurements, maybe come up with some measurements that apply equally to everyone. Okay, so the other one is how to consider data. So we see how data helps us at the workforce. But what we also got to do is you got to understand, first of all, what you're measuring. You cannot go in and measure something that you don't understand and say, this is what we're going to do, because it may be completely out of line in terms of production rates, or it may have nothing at all to do with what you're trying to accomplish. So you got to understand what you're measuring. The other one is you got to get clean data. I cannot stress this enough. Clean data. If you have dirty data, like the laundry here, then you're gonna have what kind of results coming out? Poor results, egregious results. You're gonna have things that don't make sense. And getting clean data is difficult, believe me. Sometimes it's not being measured right. Sometimes you have to let data that's lost. I used to do a lot of analytics when I was with a previous company, and I had a very hard time getting data from our clients. And the data they would give me, I would probably spend a good 8 to 10 hours cleaning the data they gave me before I could even use it to analyze anything. More like 12, 15, 18. So, but that was me. So it took me a long time to get that data clean. And once I got it clean, then I was able to really put metrics together and do analysis on it. The other one is ensure you know how to properly analyze the data. You don't want to ask someone on your team who might be a history person to analyze all this data. Yeah, they could. I'm sure they could do it, but would you rather have a history person or a person who got their degree in statistics analyze the data? You got to know how to properly analyze your data, because if you don't, then you could really come up with some very faulty information, and then you're trying to move a company, an organization, or a department forward based on data that really doesn't make any sense. All right. So what is the impact of using data? Does anybody want to think of something? What are some of the impacts of using data?
It tells me the true story.
Tells you the true story. Absolutely. It's going to say, let's just open up the blinds here and see the light. What's going on? So with that, you could use KPIs or business of the balanced scorecard, key performance indices, or business the balanced scorecard. And what I've done in the past that's really helped out is the balanced scorecard. And I like the balanced scorecard when we had our team, when I was working with the executives, and okay, here's the balanced scorecard, and everything tied into the performance of the organization based on financials. And that's how they were graded. And it made so much sense, and it made it so much easier because now everybody was on the same platform. Everybody was being held accountable for the same thing. There was no, well, I contribute more to the organization. No, here are the things that we all discussed. And of course, KPIs for other employees. So that's some of the things that you do with it. Or it's also fairness, and I led to that, the impacts of data. Remember, I talked about earlier, Gerard here, my other self, saying that, well, I'm doing 10 widgets an hour and this person's doing 6. I just don't like it at all. I'm going to go and slow down. It gives you fairness. Improves the culture. Well, if I'm that individual again who understands that I am being held accountable to these standards, but so is this individual, then it's, wow, that's great. Now I feel, everybody's being held accountable to the same thing. It improves the culture. You don't have to go into work saying, gee, this is bad. So those are the things that it does in terms of improving or the impacts that data has on your organization. So I'm going to go ahead and recap, and then we'll finish up with some questions. So we talked about the takeaways, which was understanding how we make decisions, our decision-making process. How can we use that for a better workplace? So remember that on the decisions is understanding what's going on, do critical thinking. And then we got into emotions of the workforce in the workplace. How does that make it a better place for us to work in terms of our emotions? How do we keep those in check? By doing those things, recognizing them, keeping them in check, you can create a better workforce, a better workplace. And then we finished up with data. Why is data important to our workforce? Why is data important to my department or to me? And we showed that by having data and some KPIs that you can hold people accountable, you can do better planning. Everybody's in the same boat. Everybody's in the same, area, and they all understand that we're being held accountable to the same things. So again, those are the things that we talked about that I hope that you use them as takeaways and you use them immediately at your work. It's all about business transformation. It's that was the title of this. And this is a big transformation, not only on yourself, but on your department and your organization, depending on where you're at in the organization. I mean, just think if you have 15 employees or 50 employees, and this is what you do, the transformation starts with you first, and then slowly but surely you transform your employees. All right, so with that, we open it up for any questions that anyone may have.
I have two things to add to the data. So there are two important things you have to do. First is that you have to standardize the data configuration. Like if you are in the enterprise application development, you have 5 different teams. If you do not configure the same data standard first, then how do you see the performance among several different teams? Right? Second, you have to catch the data.
So what he said, Joe, you have a mic on? Let me just repeat what you said. So what you're saying, the first thing you have to do is standardize your data, which is very, very true. You got to standardize the data so that everybody's seeing the same thing, being held accountable to the same thing. Otherwise, you might have 5 departments with 5 different data sets, 5 KPIs, 5 balanced scorecards, and everybody's doing something else. So what that does is Department A has these goals, so they're working on this one goal. Department B has these goals, so they're working on these. So when you put all 5 departments together, you have goals all over the place, and yet you're not working on the overall goal for the company.
Right.
Okay.
So for example, if you use the let's say agility is the tool for agile, right? So when you evaluate the life cycle of your sprint or your story, you have to have a standard status, right? Each status can tell you the starting point, the end point for each story life cycle. If you do not have a standard setup, then how do you evaluate the performance of each team in that company? And capture the data first. If you do not keep the data up to date, how do you evaluate the result of the work? So those are two things I want to add.
So the second point that you wanted to say was capturing the data. If you can't capture it, then how do you know what you're doing? And if you don't capture it correctly, clean data that I talked about, then you can have egregious results. Thank you for those comments, Martin. Comments are great and they're welcome. You don't have to ask questions.
Is there a question in the chat? I see there's people in the chat.
Oh, go in the
Is there
chat.
Questions online?
They have questions? Okay. All right, there you go. All right, well,
Okay.
we have a question.
If you have a question for everybody here, even the people on project. So like my client, we started going back to the office about 1 month ago. Have everybody started back to the office again? You have seen any challenge?
Well, I work for British Telecom and our US headquarters is in Irving. They've asked people to come back to the office, but they're not forcing it. Most of the people I work with are overseas, so I start at 5 a.m. most mornings. So there's a mix. So people that need to be in the office, they're asking them to be in the office. And the times that I've gone into the office, I've been so interrupted that I can't get my work done. So it's ironic. It's ironic because I'm not there that often. So people are like, oh, hey, they just want to chat.
So did you get the question?
Or others that, or any others that can.
So there's no question?
Actually, we do have an online question.
Your presentation takes us through thinking, emotion, data, fairness, and to improve a culture.
Yes.
And it's packaged under the how to go back to work in this environment and impact people for good. That's what I'm taking away from it. Would you argue that this is also a good model in a vacuum for improving culture?
Yes. So the question is, what was presented today, which was the business transformation, can we use this in a setting where it's in, I guess, where we're using a vacuum to make changes? And the answer is yes, the model. The biggest thing about what I presented today was the emotions and thinking critically, because those two things will take you a long way. You just got to recognize as a manager, as the leader, your emotions definitely impact your employees, whether you think that or not, and whether they believe that or not, they do, unless they're autistic. And once you learn that and you recognize that, and then you start learning, reading, understanding your emotions and thinking critically, you'll be able to make better decisions for your group, where you could lead better changes, better transformation, enhanced workforce. Remember, 50% of the employees, after they've been there 3 months, start thinking and looking for other jobs. How can you, as the individual, the leader, the manager, reduce that? And that's in the US, by the way. How can you reduce that to make it so that it's not 50%?
This happened to my client. Now, in the past 1 month, we lost probably 5% of the. It's not just the full-time employee, also the consultant or the manager. So what we learned is that leadership, they are watching closely, right, about this transformation result that, and also they have to make some adjustment based on the fact. But one question I heard from people is that we are doing 50%, right? So which means they try to give that a specific to everybody, say, hey, you feel this is a good day for you in the office, please do it. But one question came out that should we keep track what days the people work in the office?
What one question?
Question is that should we keep track that we have a record that what day you plan to be in the office?
Oh, whether they.
So should we keep track of that or should we avoid that?
Why would you do that?
Good question.
What's the purpose of measuring that?
I know, I've seen that taken to extremes. Well, before the pandemic, HP used to literally in the California office had chairs that would measure weight to see if somebody was there. Pretty bad. Yeah, some of the engineers that were really cute, being cute, would stack books in their chairs. Yeah, I'm not making this up. So, yeah, so it's not a good thing.
So this is something there will be some people ask the same question, right? But the answer we got is that we don't want to do that because that's a flexibility. You want to give the people their choice to keep the day they want to be in the office. But
It's trust.
Yeah,
It's
but-
trust. Do you trust them?
correct. But unless you have a team agreement, which means if this team agree, okay, I need to be in the office on Wednesday, agree with that, I think that's fine. But if you try to, just without asking, just say, hey, this person will be there on a certain day, it's not going to motivate people.
That's good.
It's also,
Exactly.
it's also micromanagement.
Yeah, exactly.
Dr. Ibarra,
Yes,
forgive my ignorance. My first visit to the PMI chapter, I'm a former military officer now working on my PMP.
thank you for your service.
I'm honored to do it and each of us are worth it. I am fascinated by something you said about 50% of employees start looking for a new job within 3 to 6 months. Is that common knowledge? Or
So there was a study done, and I have it on the presentation, so you should get that information. Yeah, it's the company's name, I think it's called Litz. But they did a survey. What they do is they help in organizations with employees and what have you. They had a survey where they learned that after 3 months, right at 3 months, 50% of the tenures that came in are thinking and wanting to look elsewhere. And then between 3 and 6 months, it's more like 60%. So yeah, so as leaders of the organization, to be able to transform that, you need to be able to understand the emotions, what you do, so that you could try to obviate those things there.
It is a surprising stat. I knew it happened, but I didn't think it's that high. I think it's gotten worse. I think it's gotten way, way worse from what I've seen.
It could be. I haven't been back in the, workforce for some years, but I could imagine. Yeah, I could imagine that.
We actually have, well, and we've had this problem, especially in our shared service centers in India. People accept a job and they don't show up.
Yes.
Yeah, because on their, because during that time, they got a better offer in the week or whatever it was. So, yeah.
I think there are 3 factors here based on what I.
We have a question online.
One is when you get start getting back to the office, you're going to deal with the traffic, the time you don't spend. That's one component. Second component is it's not going to happen a lot, but I've seen 2 people get COVID after they went back to office.
Yeah. Oh, we have it every time we have a big group of them, somebody gets COVID, every time.
The second is the infection and the increase of the fatality. Because the market, everybody trying to get people. I got the email maybe 5, 10 every day from the victim. People ask the new employee that they allow them to work from home. So that's another sign for is inflation and also salary increase because the demand is pretty high. So that's 3 components encourage people to change their job.
So this interesting information. What I would suggest is that as opposed to saying that this is what I see, feel, and believe. And again, this is based on the how we think. is to actually do some A/B testing or to do some analysis on that so that you find out, maybe in your organization, maybe within your organization, I like working from home. Do I feel that I could do better when I'm not working from home or vice versa? So as opposed to, because every organization is different. And I can't talk enough about the culture. If the culture in one organization is great and one is bad, and then the good culture says, well, it's all bad, but it's not because they don't understand. They have a great culture, but everybody else has a bad one. So that's why it's important you collect the data and make sure you think critically before you go out and make any posits and say, well, this is how it is. No, maybe that's how it is over there. Let's find out and see if it's like that here. So you could hire a consultant and say, hey, can you find out what we think here in the organization? Yes, the questions.
We have a
Heather,
question
yes, Heather,
online.
go ahead, Heather.
Thank you. Thank you. The question is, how do you manage up when it's apparent the corporation is only using revenue data and no emotional
Okay.
intelligence?
All right, can you start one more time, please? I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. How do you manage up when it's apparent the corporation is only using revenue data? They're not using emotional intelligence.
Be part of that 60%.
So that's a very good question. And again, this is geared towards the executive leaders or the people who are decision makers. You are certainly a decision maker within your own group, but yeah, there are maybe people who are, I guess, overseeing other departments that oversee your department. And that's why this business transformation is most important to start with the top, not in the middle, and definitely not from the bottom going up. This is from the top down. So when I do my work, when I go consult with companies in business transformation through critical thinking, I don't get anywhere if I hit the middle section. I have to start with the top, because if I start with the middle, the top's going to say this doesn't make sense. I don't understand this. Let's go back to your data, financial driven data portion. So yeah, it has to start from the top.
Thank you. It looks like that's the only question we have right now.
Okay, very good. Well, I've got one more slide here. You might have already seen it, but I just found it. I thought it was funny. You recognize the individual there. So here you have the before and you have the after. So that's Elon Musk, by the way. Yes.
Yeah, right around the eyes.
Yes. So, what was he doing? He was working hard. What was his friends doing? Maybe drinking. And where is he at 20 years later? Building rockets, and his friends are all sleeping at the door. I just thought that was a good thing. All right. Well, if you guys would like to reach out to me and learn more, please do so. You guys passed out my cards. So I'll give another card to you, sir. But so with that, that's all I have. Thank you very much for your time this Saturday morning.
Thank you, Dr. Brad. Great presentation. There's only three things I want to make announcement. One is the survey. If you can go to the www.nt.com, enter code 2391-4948 to complete your survey. And also they provide you feedback about our first hybrid meeting. Is there anything we can do better and prepare for the future meeting as well?
Yeah, I had a question about that. People on the phone. We're all sitting in the back here pretty much. For a hybrid meeting of this type, and in the summer, it's usually lower attendance anyway, but should you be able to see the people in this room if you're on the phone? That's what I wanted to know.
Yeah, so if I'm supposed to be able to see the people here, so I could open this up and I could see Martin, I could see Denny Williamson, and Maria Treen. So yes, I could see whoever's on Zoom here.
Okay.
But I just have to open it up. The thing I cannot solve is the chat here.
Yeah.
I went to my screen. I can't get to that screen.
Oh,
Actually, if you click on chat,
I cannot click it up. not click chat.
So the only thing we cannot do here is because we do not have additional camera.
If in you and the facility have additional camera, then that camera can, show the people in the room. I think that's the only thing we don't have today.
You might talk to Jerry about that. The other thing is, PMI had a grant or something. I think it was around $5,000 for chapters that needed to upgrade some of their equipment in order to do things like this. I'm wondering if that's still in force. We can talk about it.
Okay, so please submit your survey. The second announcement is that the next meeting is September 10th. It will be a virtual meeting because the hotel, they have some construction going on for that month, so we won't be able to do in person, but we'll come back to have it again in November. The September 10th meeting the topic will be related to safe. We don't have a specific topic yet, but it will be safe related. The last
Thing is that we do have some freebie in the back of this conference room. Feel free to grab. We have a coffee cup, and water bottle. So feel free to grab one on the way out. So, 2391-4948. Yes. Okay, that's all about it.